Hello, my friends. I hope all of you will be okay, ladies and gentlemen. You know, there was a time in my life when I prayed for arms and legs every day. I thought if God really loved me, He'd give me what I was missing. But you know what? Over time, I realized I wasn't missing anything. I was just seeing things through the wrong lens. We often chase after things that we think will make us whole: money, relationships, success, fame. But deep down, what we're really looking for is something that never fades, never leaves us empty. And that's where delighting in the Lord changes everything. When we fix our eyes on Him, not as a genie in a bottle, but as the source of our joy, our desires begin to shift. We stop saying, "Oh God, give me what I want." And we start saying, "Oh God, help me want what you've already given." I used to want to be normal. I wanted to blend in, not stand out. But God didn't make me to blend in. He made me to stand out for Him. And I believe He's calling each of us to do the same in our own unique way. When we start finding our delight in the Lord, truly enjoying Him, spending time in His Word, trusting Him with our pain, something beautiful happens. Our hearts start aligning with His. Our desires become less about what we can get and more about who we can become. It's not always easy. I'm not saying it happens overnight. There were days I cried, days I doubted, days I begged God for a different story. But now I thank Him for the story He wrote. Because when you delight in the Lord, you begin to see that His story for your life is better than the one you were trying to write on your own. So maybe today, you're asking God for something, a job, a healing, a breakthrough. Don't stop praying, but also ask Him to help you find your joy in Him, not just in the answer. Because when your joy is in Him, nothing can steal it. Not circumstances, not people, not even your own fears. That's the kind of delight that transforms your desires and transforms your life. When we talk about delighting in the Lord, it's easy to picture something poetic, like smiling during worship or having peaceful moments reading Scripture. But it's so much more than that. Delighting in the Lord is not just about feeling good. It's about shifting our entire focus. It's about changing the way we see everything around us, including our own wants, struggles, and ambitions. You see, every one of us is born with desires. That's not a flaw. That's part of how we're made. We want connection. We want purpose. We want to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem comes when we try to satisfy those desires with things that were never meant to carry that weight. We chase after relationships thinking someone else will complete us. We run after career goals hoping they'll prove our worth. We obsess over image, approval, comfort, because we believe that if we just get the right mix of success and security, we'll finally feel fulfilled. But we don't. Not really, because all those things are temporary. They're not solid ground. Now, when our delight is in the Lord, something begins to shift deep inside. We're not talking about just checking off a spiritual to-do list. We're talking about a real, living relationship with God, one where we begin to enjoy His presence more than anything else. Where we find joy not just in what He gives us, but in who He is. When that happens, we begin to see our desires change. They go from being self-centered to being God-centered, from being temporary to eternal. Instead of asking, "What can I get?" we start asking, "How can I grow? Who can I bless? What's on God's heart for my life?" I remember praying hard for something I thought I needed. I believed that if God would just answer that one request, things would finally fall into place. But He didn't, and I felt hurt. Maybe you've been there too, wondering if God is listening, questioning why the breakthrough hasn't come. But then something unexpected happened. In that waiting, in that disappointment, I started to press into God more, not for the answer, but for Him. And the more I did that, the less I was focused on what I lacked, and the more I saw what I already had. Peace, strength, identity, purpose. Things I couldn't have found if I had gotten what I originally asked for. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes when you realize your happiness doesn't depend on circumstances. Fine. That even if nothing changes on the outside, you can be full of joy on the inside because your delight is in the one who never changes. That's when your focus shifts That's when your vision clears, you stop measuring your life by what you don't have and start measuring it by who you belong to. And that's a game changer. Sometimes God doesn't change your situation because He wants to change your desires first. He wants to do a deeper work in your heart so that what you want is actually what's best for you. And what's best for you always draws you closer to Him. If you're delighting in Him, really, truly loving Him, your heart becomes fertile ground for the right desires to grow. Desires that give life instead of draining it. Desires that lead to impact instead of emptiness. This doesn't mean your old desires just vanish overnight. You'll still want things. You'll still struggle sometimes with comparison, envy, or frustration. But over time, you'll notice something. Those things don't control you like they used to. You'll catch yourself being content in places where you used to be restless. You'll find joy even in the mundane because you've learned to enjoy God in the middle of it all. You'll begin to want what He wants, not because you have to, but because you trust Him. Because you've seen that when your focus is on Him, your life starts to take on a deeper meaning than you ever imagined. And that's what delighting in the Lord does. It doesn't just make you more spiritual, it makes you more whole. It shapes you from the inside out until your desires are no longer dragging you around. They're lifting you up, aligning you with a purpose far greater than anything this world can offer. When your joy is rooted in God, something powerful begins to happen inside of you. Your desires begin to align with His will. Not because you're trying to be extra holy or super religious, but because you've discovered the secret of real joy, and it changes everything. You stop chasing things that used to matter so much, and you start craving what actually fills your soul. We live in a world that constantly tells us to follow your heart. But let's be honest, our hearts don't always know where they're going. One day we want one thing, the next day we're over it. We say, if I just had this job or that relationship, or if things look different in my life, then I'd be happy. And maybe for a little while we are, but then the high fades and we're looking again. That's because our hearts weren't meant to lead. We were meant to be led by something bigger than ourselves. When you start finding your joy in the Lord, not just visiting Him on Sundays or when things go wrong, but genuinely enjoying His presence, delighting in who He is, trusting Him day by day, something inside shifts. Your perspective starts to change. Suddenly, success doesn't look like just climbing a ladder. It looks like walking in obedience. Love doesn't look like just being wanted. It looks like being known by God and loving others the same way. Peace doesn't mean having a problem-free life. It means having God with you in every storm. There's a joy that comes from knowing that God isn't just out there somewhere, but He's with you, for you, and working in you. And when that becomes your joy, your desires start to reflect His heart. You start praying differently. Instead of a God, give me what I want, it becomes a God, show me what you want. And you're not scared of that question anymore because you've seen that His will is good, even if it's different from your plan. Some people think that God's will is going to ruin all their fun. Like following Him means giving up everything they enjoy. But that's not who God is. He's not trying to take your joy. He is your joy. The closer you get to Him, the more you realize He's the source of every good thing. He's not here to rob you of your dreams. He's here to shape your dreams into something better, something eternal, something that won't leave you empty in the end. I've seen it in my own life. The things I used to beg God for, the things I thought would complete me, they faded. Not because I became super spiritual, but because God gave me something better, Himself. And from that place of joy, I've started to desire things that build His kingdom, not just my comfort. Things that make an impact, not just make me feel important. It's wild how much peace that brings. I don't have to chase every opportunity or worry about every closed door. I just have to stay close to Him and trust that He's shaping my heart as I go. Sometimes we think our desires are fixed, that we'll always want what we want, and that's just how it is. But the truth is, our desires are flexible. They're influenced by what we focus on. If you focus on comparison, your desires will be shaped by envy. If you focus on fear, your desires will be shaped by control. But if you focus on God, if your joy is in Him, your desires start to reflect His peace, His purpose, His love. And suddenly, things that used to seem important start to lose their grip. You're no longer driven by the need to prove yourself or impress others. You're driven by a quiet confidence that you're walking in step with the one who made you. And here's the best part. When your desires align with God's will, you don't have to force things to happen. You're not striving anymore. You're just trusting. You're just walking. And along the way, you find that the deepest desires of your heart, the ones that really matter, are actually being fulfilled in ways you never expected. Not always how you planned, but better, fuller, eternal. When your joy is rooted in God, your heart is safe. It's steady. You don't have to keep chasing things to feel okay. You've found the one who satisfies, and in him, your desires find their true home. There's this expectation most of us grow up with that life is supposed to follow a certain path. You go to school, get a job, maybe fall in love, start a family, build a future. And along the way, you start forming this picture in your head of what your life should look like. You dream, you plan, you set goals, and you pray that God will help you get there. And sometimes when things don't go the way we imagined, it's easy to feel like something went wrong, or that God somehow got it wrong. But the truth is, God's plan for us is often different from what we expect. And thank God for that, because his plan is not only different, it's better. I've had times where I was absolutely sure I knew what was best for me. I thought I had it all figured out. I told God, this is the way, just bless it and we'll be good. But over time, I realized that what I was really doing was asking God to serve my plan instead of surrendering to his. That's a hard thing to admit, but it's something a lot of us do without even realizing it. We want God's help, sure, but we still want to be the one steering the ship. And yet, it's in the moments when life doesn't go according to plan that we start to see the beauty of surrender. When doors close, when people walk away, when the path gets unclear, that's when we discover how deeply God is involved in our story. Not just in the victories, but in the redirections. Not just in the answered prayers, but in the ones that seem to go unheard. Sometimes the things we label as disappointments are actually divine appointments. God sees the big picture. He knows what's ahead. And he's not just interested in giving us a comfortable life. He's interested in shaping our character, growing our faith, and using us for purposes far beyond what we can see. We might think we're ready for something, but God knows what we're ready for and what we need to go through first in order to become who he's called us to be. There have been moments in my life when I looked back and thanked God for not giving me what I asked for. At the time, it felt painful. I didn't understand why things weren't working out, but now I can see how those are no's and are not yet's were actually God's protection and preparation. He was leading me somewhere better, even when I couldn't see it. His plan isn't always comfortable, but it is always good. And good doesn't mean easy. It means purposeful. It means that nothing is wasted. Every detour, every delay, every broken dream becomes part of a bigger story, one that brings glory to God and growth to us. We often measure God's faithfulness by how closely our lives match our plans. But God measures success by how closely our hearts follow his. That's why sometimes he interrupts our plans, not to hurt us, but to rescue us from settling for something less than his best. He knows what we need to let go of, what we need to walk through, and what we need to become in the process. The amazing thing is that even when we take wrong turns, even when we resist or run, God is still faithful. He weaves it all together. He's the master of redirection. He takes broken plans and builds something beautiful. He takes the pieces and creates something that tells a story of grace and redemption. When you trust that his plan is better, even when it's different, you begin to walk in peace. You stop trying to control everything. You stop needing everything to look a certain way before you can be okay. Because your hope is no longer in the plan, it's in the planner. And that changes everything. So yes, God's plan is often different, but it's filled with purpose. It's laced with grace. And it leads you to places you never would have gone on your own. Places of deeper joy, stronger faith, and real impact. Places that not only change your life, but the lives of people around you. All because you let go of your idea of the perfect life and embraced the far better plan of the one who knows you better than anyone ever could. We all have this natural pull toward wanting to receive things, blessings, answers, breakthroughs. It's part of being human. And there's nothing wrong with wanting good things in life. God is a good father, and he delights in giving good gifts to his children. But somewhere along the way, many of us start believing that fulfillment is found only in what we receive. We think if we can just get the relationship, the promotion, the healing, the recognition, then we'll finally be whole. Then we'll finally have peace. Then we'll feel like we matter. But real fulfillment doesn't come from what we receive. It comes from who we become in Christ. There have been seasons in my life when I've received incredible blessings, and I'm thankful for them. But those weren't the moments that shaped me the most. The moments that truly changed me were the ones when I had to wrestle with God in the dark. The ones where the answer didn't come and I had to learn to trust him anyway. The ones where I had nothing to offer except my brokenness, and he met me there. That's where the real growth happened. That's where my identity was refined and my faith was stretched. That's where I became more like him. Not because I got what I wanted, but because I surrendered and allowed him to work in me. Becoming more like Christ isn't always easy. In fact, most of the time it's uncomfortable. It involves letting go of pride, selfish ambition, fear, comparison, bitterness. It means choosing forgiveness when you'd rather hold a grudge, choosing patience when you're desperate to rush ahead, choosing faith when you're surrounded by uncertainty. These aren't glamorous moments. They don't get applause. But they are the moments where true transformation happens, where our character is formed, where our hearts start to reflect the heart of God. We live in a culture that celebrates quick success and instant gratification. But God is far more interested in long-term fruit. He's not just working to improve your circumstances. He's working to shape your soul. And sometimes that means you don't get what you thought you needed. Sometimes it means staying in a hard place longer than you planned. But if you lean in instead of running away, if you allow him to work in the process, you'll come out of it with something more valuable than any temporary blessing. You'll come out with depth, with wisdom, with a faith that isn't shaken by every step. When you start focusing on who you're becoming in Christ, your whole perspective shifts. You stop chasing things just to feel valuable because you realize you already are. You stop living for approval because you know you're already loved. You stop tying your joy to your circumstances because you've learned how to find joy in his presence. It's not that blessings are bad. They're not. They're good gifts, and we can receive them with gratitude. But they're not the foundation. It's what happens when the blessing delays. What happens when the thing you prayed for doesn't come the way you expected? If your fulfillment is tied to what you receive, you'll constantly feel empty, disappointed, and anxious. But if your fulfillment is rooted in your relationship with Christ, nothing can take that away. Not setbacks, not silence, not suffering. God cares deeply about who you're becoming because he sees the eternal picture. He knows what he created you for, and he's committed to growing you into that person, even if it means walking through some fire along the way. But here's the beautiful part. You're not doing it alone. He's right there in every step, shaping you with grace, covering you with mercy, and leading you in love. So while it's okay to hope, to dream, to pray for things you long for, never forget that the real gift is what God is doing inside you. Every act of surrender, every choice to trust, every moment of worship in the middle of pain, it's all forming you into someone who looks more like Jesus. And that more than anything you could receive is what brings true, lasting fulfillment. There's something powerful that happens when your desires begin to reflect God's heart. Your life begins to move in the direction of impact, not just personal satisfaction. It's no longer just about what you can get out of life, but about what you can give, how you can serve, how you can be a light in a world that desperately needs hope. When your heart aligns with his, your life starts to overflow, and it touches people in ways you never imagined. Many people spend their entire lives trying to find meaning. They chase experiences, accomplishments, status, trying to feel like they've done something that matters. But the truth is, lasting impact doesn't come from what you build for yourself. It comes from what you allow God to build through you. It's not about being famous or successful by the world's standards. It's about being faithful. It's about being available. It's about waking up each day and saying, "Oh God, use me." When your desires align with God's, you start caring about what He cares about. Your heart breaks for the things that break His. You begin to notice people you used to overlook. You start praying for strangers, giving more generously, forgiving more freely, speaking truth even when it's hard. You start showing up in people's lives not because it benefits you, but because God has placed something inside you that refuses to stay quiet. That's when your life becomes a testimony. Not because you're perfect, but because God's love is being poured through your imperfections. People begin to see Jesus in the way you live, in the way you love, in the way you respond when things don't go your way. And you may not always see the impact. You may not get applause or recognition. But make no mistake, when your heart is in sync with God's, your life echoes into eternity. I've seen this truth play out over and over, not just in my own story, but in the lives of others who chose to let God shape their desire. I've watched people walk through unimaginable pain and still find a way to serve others with joy. I've seen people give their last dollar to someone in need, not because they were trying to be heroic, but because their hearts were so full of God's compassion that they couldn't ignore the need. That's the kind of impact that changes the world. Quiet, humble, often unseen, but incredibly powerful. God is not looking for perfect vessels. He's looking for willing ones. And when your heart is aligned with His, you don't have to force your life to matter. It just does. Your conversations start carrying more weight. Your time becomes more intentional. Your work, your relationships, even your pain, it all becomes part of something bigger than yourself. And here's what's beautiful. The more you let God shape your desires, the more fulfilling your life becomes. Not because everything is easy, but because everything has purpose. You're not just drifting. You're moving forward with clarity. You're not just reacting to life. You're living on mission. That's the kind of life that satisfies your soul in a way that nothing else can. It doesn't mean you won't have personal dreams or passions. God gave you those too. But as you delight in Him, those dreams get refined. They get elevated. They become not just about your success, but about His glory. Not just about comfort, but about calling. You may still want to be a doctor or a teacher or a business leader, but now it's not just a career, it's a platform. It's a way to represent Jesus in the space He's placed you. And even in the small moments, when no one's watching, when no one's clapping, your life still matters. Because it's being lived in alignment with God's heart. That's the impact that counts. That's the legacy that lasts. You're not just existing anymore. You're living with purpose on purpose. You're becoming a vessel of love, of truth, of hope, of light. And it all starts with desire, with letting God shape what you long for, with choosing to say, "Oh Lord, not just my will, but yours." That surrender relives into extraordinary testimonies. That alignment is what brings heaven to earth through people just like you. Thanks a lot of you guys. God bless all of you with good health,